If one was a black South African, it was really a very bad life, and you were oppressed. There were racist laws that applied to you from the day you were born until the day you died. And it was a very unfair, uneven situation where black people were forced to live in particular areas with bad facilities, with bad education, and the money was spent on the minority white population. So it was pretty bad.
Mm-hmm. But you were one among of those people who weren't really affected by all the rules.
That's true.
Right?
Well, I came from a comfortable home. Mm-hmm. But the crucial event in my life was when I went to university in Johannesburg, to Witwatersrand University as it's called, and for the first time I met black South Africans as equals, as students, but the minute we stepped off the campus of the university, different laws applied. As a white student, I was privileged. I went to a comfortable home with electricity and running water, and some of those black students had to live in Soweto in a black township with very poor facilities. Some of them didn't have electricity, and they had to carry identification documents as a black person that I as a white person didn't have to carry, and I became angry and frustrated at the unfairness of the system.
Mm-hmm. Is that why you wanted to become a lawyer?
No, I'd already decided to become a lawyer before that, but it's certainly one of the reasons I became active as a student leader in the anti-apartheid movement. When I left university, I had a commercial practice. It was strange to end up as an international prosecutor, but I was a commercial lawyer. I enjoyed practicing law, and I built up a big practice, and then the difficult decision was when I was offered a position as a judge during the apartheid era. That was very difficult for obvious reasons, but I was able, together with other judges who had a similar view, we were able to begin to interpret even the apartheid laws in favor of individuals, and particularly black individuals.
That was back in 1980, right?
Right.
You became the youngest Supreme Court judge in South Africa.
Right.
How old were you?
I was 39.
39, and that was the youngest.
Right.
Was it a very difficult decision?
It was a very difficult decision from a moral point of view and also from a financial point of view, because as a private practitioner I was earning 3 or 4 times what I was going to earn as a judge.
And morally, why was it difficult?
Morally, because I had to take an oath to apply the law, and that included laws that I regarded as immoral and unjust.
So why did you take on the job?
Because I thought that it was important, and really I had a role model. There was a judge who died some years ago who was with me on the Constitutional Court after the end of apartheid. His name was John Ditcott. But he and I had similar views about apartheid. He was a few years older, and he took an appointment on the bench about 5 years before I did. And he really made a huge difference in interpreting the laws in favor of the individual. And it seemed to me that it was more effective to fight the system from inside than to remain outside making a lot of money as a commercial lawyer. So I decided, and it wasn't easy, but I decided that is what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Can you please give some examples of how you actually interpret the law and then it becomes a better society?
Well, the first major case in that regard that I had involved an elderly Indian South African woman. Her name was Govender, Mrs. Govender, and she was living, because she was desperate for accommodation, under the apartheid system, black people had to live in black areas and Indian people had to live in Indian areas. And she couldn't get accommodation in the Indian area of Johannesburg, so she lived illegally in a white area. And she was prosecuted and brought to court, and under the law it provided that anybody found guilty of living in the illegal area may be evicted, may be forced to leave that home. And the law was started in 1950, and this was 1981, and millions of black South Africans had been forced to leave the wrong area, and Mrs. Govender pleaded guilty, But she was represented by the Legal Resources Centre, which was a public interest law firm that acted in these sorts of cases, and also, incidentally, was very instrumental in making it, in helping me decide to accept an appointment. But their case was that they brought evidence to show that Mrs. Govender had been waiting for 7 years for a legal home in an Indian area, and that she would have to wait for another 10 years. And I was unhappy during the argument on the case, and it suddenly occurred to me that the words of the law said may be evicted, not shall, but may. And I was sitting with another judge, and I said, I'd like to discuss it with you further. And I said, this is a discretion. It doesn't say the judge has to kick this person out of their home, and it should be exercised judicially. And we gave an order. I gave the opinion, the judgment, and said that in these cases the judge doesn't act automatically. There has to be a reason for the eviction order, and one of the considerations is the availability of alternative accommodation. I said, in this case, there's no alternative accommodation for this woman. She'd have to leave Johannesburg. Her children would have to lose their employment. And I said there was no basis to grant the eviction order, and we set it aside. And the result was, unexpected to me, there were never any further prosecutions under that legislation, because the government couldn't prove alternative accommodation because there wasn't any. So there was no point. They didn't want to put people in prison. They wanted to keep them out of the white areas. And the result of that decision was that tens of thousands of black South Africans started moving into previously white areas. So that's one example. And there are others of other judgments which, by interpreting the law, created rights for black South Africans.
Do you expect that your decision will have such repercussions on the society?
Absolutely not. I wish I could say yes, but I didn't.